Hello and welcome to the Unnamed Automotive Podcast. My name is Sami Assad, and with me, as always, is my good friend and fellow automotive journalist, Benjamin Hunting. Say hi to the people, Ben.
Greetings, human listeners. Did you know that Hans Zimmer was named one of the top 100 living geniuses, published by the Daily Telegraph in 2007?
Yeah, but that was nearly 20 years ago. So is that still relevant?
You tell me.
That is the voice and opinion of my co-host, Benjamin Hunting.
It's not my opinion. It's the opinion of the Daily Telegraph.
You can find his work all over the internet. Ben, plug a couple of publications you've written for, please.
Sure, you can find my work at Motor Trend and at driving.ca.
And you can find my work at autotrader.ca, driving.ca, and Capital One's Auto Navigator.
You just had to throw in one more, didn't you? You just had to.
For once in my life, I had to one-up you today.
I go low, you go high. I see how it works.
But when I go high, you go low.
Okay.
Okay. Ben, we've got some really cool cars to talk about this week. Things that I don't think we've really talked about on the show before. So,
Sami, do you really have a cool car to talk about, or do you have a car that frustrated you and you need to talk about those frustrations?
I'm going to talk about one of the hardest cars I've ever had to review in my job, and that's the 2025 Volvo EX90. Because I'm going to be clear with you, Ben. I think I'm a techie. I love gadgets. I have all kinds of gadgets. I dismantle them. I change my operating systems for every month, and I love technology. I love seeing how automakers incorporate new technology and, you know, what kind of interesting things they can come up with. And this car is really difficult to review because at first glance, it is a really sweet electric vehicle. But after a week with it, I felt like it was like totally incompatible with me. I could not figure it out. I'm going to
go out on a limb here and say that you should not have to like technology or be a quote unquote techie, a word Sami has imported from the 90s, in order to drive a new car.
I think you're right. And I also think it's important to point out that there are, like, during my time researching this vehicle and trying to figure out what wasn't quite working with me, it turns out I'm not the only person. I went on like all these Volvo EX90 forums and subreddits and Facebook groups.
Don't pretend you're not on those forums every single day, even if you don't have a press car from Volvo.
And I found that the like communities behind this vehicle are constantly talking about how to resolve software issues that they encounter. And that's just one of the worst signs, including a PDF cheat sheet that somebody made that has all of the various ways to reset the various computers in this vehicle.
That's so weird. A cheat sheet?
That's an awful way.
Can you imagine if you had to buy a copy of Nintendo Power to figure out how to quote unquote finish your car?
Yeah, basically. And this is really tough. I mean, I think this is a really difficult thing because the car looks really good and is one of the actual driving experience, the ride quality, the performance is really good. Is among one of the best riding cars I've probably ever been in, especially when it comes to 3-row EVs. But I had so many frustrations just using it, and so many times where I wanted to facepalm and be like, why did you take that? Why did you make that decision?
So we both drove the EX30. We both did not like it, although I think I liked it less than you did because we had very similar problems with the software. Is the EX90 a continuation of that? Or is it somehow
100% a continuation of that? I think maybe there's a couple of things that are better and a couple of things that are worse. For example, there is a driver display now. It is a 9-inch display that's mounted on the steering column. It is. I'm going to be blunt with you on this thing. It is not a nice screen. It is just. It reminds me a lot of the Ford Mach-E. It's just basically a 9-inch rectangle. It tells you the speed and the speed limit. There's a couple of different screens that show you like the map and what the sensors are showing are sensing around the car, but there's no like customization of that screen. There's no way to see like media information on that screen. There's all sorts of like, I don't know, it's weird. It's just like there.
And the Mach-E, that screen is mounted pretty low as well. It's not easy to see. Is it the same kind of thing on the Volvo?
No, I wouldn't call it low. My main issue is that the starting price of this car is $81,000, and the top trim, which I probably drove here, is $90,000. And when you reach that $90,000 mark, you know, anything short of perfection is kind of really noticeable.
Yeah, there's a lot of choices. You could do better, I guess.
In Canada, it's a $115,000 base price because there is no base model apparently in Canada. And my vehicle, yeah.
I was going to say, whenever there's not a base model, that's code for we don't expect to sell more than a dozen in this market.
Yeah, and mine had the up package on that, which added another 5,600 Canadian.
Up package?
Yeah, there's like an upgrade package. I think it's called the Ultra package or something.
Okay, I thought maybe it was called Up, which we've seen that before. So
I think Kia had maybe something like that. Or
yeah, the Kia Soul I think had like that. Yeah.
So let me tell you, like, my first impressions with the vehicle was really like it wasn't off to a great start because we couldn't. Me and the fleet manager couldn't figure out how to open the trunk from outside the vehicle. Normally, I think the approach is to look at the key fob, press the button that shows the icon of lifting the tailgate. This button does not have any. This key fob does not have any buttons on it. Issue number one. So, and we couldn't quite find the latch, which is mounted, which is actually found much lower on the tailgate and closer to the bottom of the vehicle, close to the license plate. So instead, I went into the vehicle and I tried to find a switch for that. There is no switch for it. Instead, to open the tailgate, you have to use a on-screen button. Not only just use it, you have to press and hold this button. It is not in a like braceable area like the corner of the screen. It is just like in the, let's say, center of the screen.
Central. So you can't open the trunk from the outside.
You can. There is a latch, but the hands-free function is there. You have to do a quick kicking motion with your feet under the tailgate, and it'll do that too. But you know, this is. I'm going to be clear. This is not traditional. Like that's the thing I'm getting at. Everything that the vehicle has decided to do in terms of regular controls is just untraditional. If I want to change the light settings, as in I want to turn on the low lights or the DLRs or turn them off or put it on auto, I have to do that through the touchscreen. If I want to change how sensitive the automatic windshield wipers are, I have to do that through the touchscreen. If I want to change my massage seats function, I also have to do that through the touch. I have to actually enable them. I have to enable a dialogue on the touchscreen with a button on the seat, and then cycle through a couple of these programs. They're labeled A, B, C, D, and E, which is not very descriptive. There is a more descriptive name. However, it's written in gray on black, which is hard to read. And then by the time you've figured out what massage function you want to start, the car starts complaining about you not paying attention to the road in front of you.
Yeah, I was about to say, in order to do any or all of these things, you're diverting your attention from the task of driving.
A lot of your attention. I mean, if they were just like single button clicks and not a lot of reading, I think that works. I've always said that there was something about the first generation infotainment system on Ford, which is called My Ford Touch, a very slow system and prone to, I think, crashing or freezing. But one of the easiest things about it was if you just clicked on either, like the corners of the screen were basically an entire shortcut. So if you wanted to be in the navigation, you would just push somewhere around the top right corner of that screen. If you wanted something about the communications part, you would go to the top left. And I thought that was a really easy way to just navigate the infotainment system without having to actually look at it.
Now, kind of a tangent, but when do you think we're going to get away from the naming system where we add my in front of everything or I in front of everything?
Oh yeah, we're never getting away from that. Not a chance.
Incredible. It just feels so dated. You know, like I'm picking up an Escalade IQ next week. Why is it called the IQ? Why is the I lowercase? Because someone made a phone 20 years ago, right?
I thought it was something to do with how Cadillac wants all of its EVs to end with Q or IQ.
No, but the I itself. Like, why would you call a vehicle the IQ? Didn't we have a Lexus called the IQ as well? Or
Did
am I
we?
thinking of something else? I thought there was
Scion IQ.
Scion IQ. Okay, so this my thing just makes me think of, I don't know, early 2000s computer technology, and somehow we're still using that phrase in so many areas of our lives. It blows my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. It's
Like, why do we need that possessive descriptor in front of it? It just doesn't make any sense.
Well, I guess so. It reminds me. I think it's a because that was such a formative time for technology. It reminds people that these vehicles are, or these technologies are, on the forefront of
But there were lots
innovation,
of
which is wrong.
formative. There are a lot of formative things like that happened in the '60s, and we're not calling people daddy-o whatever. You know, like it's just
The Dodge Dart Swinger Edition was not good enough for you.
no.
Remember I mentioned the key fob that didn't have any buttons on it?
Yes.
Well, apparently it needed to be charged. Using
I had
wireless,
that same. The EX30 had the same fob. It's just ridiculous.
using the wireless. What am I charging it for? What does it do that requires? I have three keys on my key ring, and none of them require charging. They all have buttons on them to communicate to the vehicle.
Was there a proximity sensor in the passenger side of the vehicle?
I think so. Yeah. What do you
Because
mean?
there wasn't in the EX30.
Man, every time I looked at the car, the door handles stuck out. It was weird to me.
'Cause
I don't know what the heck was going on. It made me always question whether it was locked or had a key
That's your
inside it.
$90,000 spent well right there. Because of the EX30, you could not open it from the passenger side.
No,
Because
I
you
could
had this
definitely do it.
buttonless key fob.
Yeah.
So you couldn't open it by pushing a button. You had to walk around to the driver's side, open the door, go around back to the passenger side, and hope it hadn't locked itself by the time you got there.
Okay, there were a couple more things that I was going to complain about. I mentioned adjusting the mirrors and steering wheel is done through the touch screen and the on steering wheel buttons. So basically
Unacceptable. Straight to jail. Straight to jail with that feature.
You go to the vehicle, you go to driver controls, you go to mirror controls, and
I'm
then
already in the ditch.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I drove off the pier.
All because, and then you have to use a couple of buttons on your steering wheel that move the steering wheel or the mirrors as needed. Another weird thing, there are permanent shortcuts on the home screen for a variety of functions, but they change, which I found kind of dumb
You just described them as
100%.
permanent.
Yeah, so sorry. Quick shortcuts, let's say. I think they were supposed to be permanent, but they're not. So at speeds below 20 kilometers an hour, I'm not sure what that is in miles per hour. I'll do the math in a moment.
It's like 45.
What?
Sorry, I thought you said miles.
At speeds below 20 kilometers an hour, there's a little like parking camera button on the shortcut.
13 miles.
Okay, perfect. There's a little camera icon on the shortcut bar so that you can turn on all the parking sensors and look at the cameras and make sure that you're parking somewhere. At speeds above that, it changes to a performance mode, an all-wheel drive performance mode, so you can get all of the fun out of this twin motor powertrain. However, I drive at in city speeds where I'm constantly straddling that speed, and I'm just watching these two icons flip back and forth, and they don't just change from one icon to another.
It's hypnotic.
One icon fades away, the other ones fill in that gap and then move back and then put the new one in, and I think that's more distracting than trying to read whatever the massage functions do. It is the funniest thing in the world to watch a car try to reconfigure its icons.
Just watch out the windshield and you won't have to look at this weird display.
It's so weird.
Also, have you told us what this vehicle is yet?
EX90, I said, no?
Yeah, but what is the EX90?
The EX90 is a 3-row electric SUV.
How big is it?
It is marginal. It is barely larger than the regular XC90. Okay. It is very loosely based on it. In fact, the only real designation, the only way you can tell that this is the EX90 than the XC90 is that it has this little hump on top of the windshield that houses a LiDAR sensor, which you'd expect would enable a hands-free driving function. And that's not the case. This feature has not been enabled by Volvo. I'm sure it will be coming soon. I don't know.
Wait, so the hardware is there, but it's not active?
The hardware is there and changes the design of the vehicle. I think that's important to point out because as far as I know, a lot of Cadillac or GM vehicles that have Super Cruise don't have a little housing on top of them that is like, you know what I mean?
But to be fair, like how many GM SUVs had like literally 3 shark fin antennas at various random spots on the roof?
That's true. I always remember this one story from Range Rover, who was like, "Oh, we have 2 shark fins because when we put all of our antenna and like
It gets too hot, right?
it gets too hot and then breaks." I'm like, wow, of all of the things you decided to deal with in terms of your electronics, that was the one.
It was probably the one closest to causing a visible fire.
Anyways, the interesting thing is, you know, the car looks really good. Inside, it also looks really good. There's clearly an approach to minimalism. They want to keep buttons and switches to a minimum.
Why?
But
Why? No one's asked the customer, do you want fewer buttons and switches? I don't recall ever being asked that.
in fact, in the future, I think we're going to be getting a lot more many more buttons. I think I mentioned this maybe to you privately or on a previous episode, but the Euro NCAP, which is their safety standards, kind of like NHTSA here in America, and I guess NORCAN for Canada. What is the safety regulation here? The company that like tests and rates the safety ratings of the vehicles in Europe has announced that starting in 2026, they will only give full safety scores to vehicles that have a variety of physical buttons for things like the horn, I think, wipers and lights and hazard lights and controls like that. So I think we're going to start slowly going back to that. And it's also funny because it's not like the EX90 doesn't have physical switches. There's actually a big knob on the center, you know, by the armrest for volume and media controls. I don't understand why we can have that and not a trunk button somewhere in the car.
Do you think that we're actually going to get useful buttons, or do you think they're going to do the letter of the law and like put them in the console all together? So you have to pop open the console and then all those buttons are there and they satisfy the regulation, but they don't interfere with how their interface looks.
They're going to hide the buttons, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely possible, and impact the usability of the vehicle at the same time, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm going to tell you the car, like the interior is pretty. It just really is very attractive. Apparently, it's made with some sort of morals in mind. There's no leather. All of the synthetic or leather replacement is called Nordico, is made with materials sourced from plastic bottles and PVC. Feels good, looks good. The wood accents are also gorgeous. I would just really... In terms of design, I think Volvo knows what a clean design is, with the exception of the LiDAR hump that's on top of this thing. And it's also worth pointing out that this car drives really, really sweet. Man, I could not get over how good this car drove and how difficult it was to do basic things. It was such a contrast. This is why the overall impression I have is so mixed, because if I never had to use that infotainment system, if it had traditional buttons for lights and the trunk and all the regular functions, I would love driving this thing. It is so good. So there's a pair of motors. Combined, they make 510 horsepower and 671 pound-feet of torque. The lower models in the US make a little less horsepower, I think 400 horsepower, but this top trim does 0 to 60 in 5 seconds, which is really quick.
But that must mean it weighs a lot.
It weighs 6,000 pounds.
Oh my goodness.
And it does
RIP your tire budget.
Yeah. But it doesn't feel that way. It doesn't feel that way because I've driven a bunch of Volvos that I felt kind of clumsy, especially when you're doing things. Well, I live in a city with a lot of potholes. You can usually feel that weight as that car just thumps into these potholes. You can feel it when you get onto like driveways, for example, or off of driveways. There's just like a heft to the motion of these vehicles. This car does not have that. There's a two chamber air spring setup. That's one more spring that's typically found on the XC90. One more chamber, that's found in the XC90, and it is one of the smoothest suspension systems I've ever experienced in a mainstream or luxury vehicle. I think Mercedes would kill to have this kind of ride quality. It is so smooth.
Throwing down the gauntlet.
I really think it was fantastic in terms of that feel. And even, we do some of our videos at driving.ca in more rural areas and sometimes in parks, and they have really ugly rutted roads where we do a lot of our static shots, and just getting to these was like, it was like so pillowy. It was so cushiony. You would not feel those potholes in any way or form.
Didn't Mercedes come up with a system that like had cameras watching the road for potholes and would was it called magic body control?
Yeah, I think they do. I think Audi has one as well, Magic Ride or something like that.
So you're saying Volvo is like a step above that?
Is at that level for sure. I think the control it has with this air spring and air suspension setup is fantastic. I think given the weight of this vehicle as well, I think it's among the best I've ever been in. In addition to that, there's the usual fairly good adaptive cruise control system. It's just so bad that there isn't a hands-free function because the nagging face sensors is just so annoying, and for it to be so annoying without having a like benefit other than safety, I guess, is annoying. So, and it was also super strange to not have like gap adjustment ready at hand. In fact, I could not find a gap adjustment setup or button anywhere on the car. It's not like the BMWs where you just have to go through a couple of screens and you'll find it. This one I just couldn't find it all, which is crazy.
So speaking of crazy, this is the $90,000 car.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other vehicles at that price point.
Yeah.
Like, aren't we in like X7 territory?
Yeah, but the X7 isn't an EV.
But you're right. But
so I'm gonna be clear with you. I don't know if I can recommend this car in any way or form. And anybody who's looking at not in any way or form until this software is like perfected. I don't know if they can do that without completely botching whatever, minimalist design they have on their screen. But and I imagine that Volvo will be taking as much feedback to try to update and perfect it. They're going to put in that hands-free driving system whenever it's available. But there are a bunch of, I think, better options in both the premium and mainstream space. And I think shoppers should take a look at the Kia EV9, the new Hyundai Ioniq 9, the Volkswagen ID Buzz, the Rivian R1S, and the Cadillac Vistiq, just to name a couple of other three-rows that are in this price range, if not even cheaper.
It's crazy to me that, as you just said, so much of this software is intended to take the place of existing physical controls that work properly. Mm-hmm. And yet it's been released without actually working properly. We're being given software that does not improve the experience of the vehicle. And 100%. you're having to say to people, don't buy this car until they figure it out. Why didn't they figure it out before putting it on sale? Yeah, that is the craziest part of it to me. It's like, it's one thing to have a software that gives you crazy benefits and say, okay, you don't get physical buttons anymore, but it is better in some way. But there's nothing better about this. And in fact, it's broken.
So I'm going to clear up a couple of things. First of all, this is a Google Android Automotive based infotainment system. It requires a Google account to work. And I do not sign into my Google account on these things, mainly because I don't know what the privacy situation is. These cars get handed off to other journalists or media people or whatever.
But even if they didn't, that's like one more way your information will be monetized and tracked and whatever. Yeah. And it's so unnecessary.
And yeah, my last car didn't need any accounts or anything like that.
Your current car doesn't need any accounts.
Yeah. So, but as a result, it means that I don't get access to my favorite apps, for example. I'm used to using Android Auto as the smartphone projection system, and I like to listen to my Pocket Cast or use Waze. And in order to get those features, I have to sign in. I have to download I have to sign into my Google account on the car. I have to sign into my Spotify account on the car. And then there's all this, like I said, like you just said, there's all this like account handling and data that I'm not in my position as a test driver. I'm not comfortable just logging into these things and doing all of these things that are personal to me, right?
And I know some people are listening and they're saying, well, if I owned the car, then I only have to log in one time and it's not a big deal and I'm okay with the data sharing. But
what if you share this car?
Exactly. So I've mentioned this in the past. The electrician who works on my home from time to time, he has a Blazer EV and he likes the vehicle very much, except for the fact that he shares it with his wife and having to log in and log out is a huge hassle. that would not be required whatsoever if you were just doing phone mirroring.
Right.
It is a system that is not improving the experience of owners whatsoever.
So, alternatively, this car comes with Apple CarPlay. You don't have to log into anything. Just plug it in or use wireless.
Just
Apple
CarPlay, though. No Android Auto.
No Android Auto. Okay, that's note number one. Note number two, I only get a week with this vehicle to figure out all of its quirks and the best workflow with it. And clearly, it has a different workflow than every other car I've ever driven in. It might just take a lot of getting used to, a lot of patience. I don't know how much. Like, does it really make sense to adjust to does it really make sense to take a month to adjust to a vehicle? I think no. But for other people who have invested $90,000 or $115,000 into their vehicle, that might be a step worth taking. I don't think so. I don't think that's part of my personality.
I think that most people, when confronted with a system that they don't understand in their car, are going to ignore the parts that they don't understand. And that functionality will not get used. And that may entirely be why this feedback loop with car companies is broken, because they're not hearing from customers saying, I hate using this feature, because the customers are not using that feature.
Yeah, 100%. So it is such, like I said, it's such a difficult vehicle because it feels unfinished. It feels, you know what it is? It's Teslafication, I think, in a way, is that, you know, Tesla releases a car that, you know, they skimp out on these physical controls. They showcase this updatable infotainment system, and people liked Teslas. They bought a lot of Teslas, but for a variety of reasons, not just because of this infotainment system setup that they have, but because they were available, because there was a fast charging network that worked with them, because they had tons of performance. But all these other automakers are looking at Tesla and I think taking the wrong lesson from them.
Yeah, of course.
And just it's just not work. It does not work. I don't.
But it's also cost cutting. It's cost cutting for them too.
I don't know, man. It's got so many advantages in other areas that I don't know how the cost cutting is like effective for them to just be like, yeah, we're not going to put switches in there.
And well, when you're building thousands and thousands of vehicles, one switch adds up. That's how they're looking at it.
And then on the consumer side, I think replacing an infotainment system that controls every part of your car is way more expensive than replacing a window switch. You know what I mean? Or a trunk switch.
I mean, maybe, but they're not going to replace the infotainment system. They're just going to change the software.
No, but I mean, if you break it, if it's glitchy, or if it's, you know. Anyways, so yeah, I mean, my approach is wait and see if this changes, if things improve software-wise. Drive it, because it really is a great drive, but you really have to figure out how you're going to integrate this in-cabin technology with your way of working with a car. Like, it just didn't work for me.
Okay, so I drove a vehicle this past week that is equally complicated in some ways, but most of that is in the drivetrain area, and the interface isn't really not at the same level as what Sami's talking about, but it's also a vehicle that we've talked about before on the show in a different form. I drove.
Okay, stop teasing it. Tell me.
I drove the 2025 BMW M5 Touring, aka the Wagon, aka the long roof that we've been waiting to be sold in North America since, I don't know, the 90s. This is the first time the Wagon version of the M5 has ever been available on this side of the Atlantic. And it's kind of a big deal because, you know, Audi had the RS6 and everyone was excited about that. And Mercedes-Benz has had the E63 Wagon and everyone was super excited about that. But BMW was really stubbornly keeping the M5 for the European market. And for this latest generation car, which is controversial for some because it moved to being a plug-in hybrid, it gained 1,000 pounds of weight compared to the model it replaced. And it's not actually any faster. It's a little bit slower. And these are all things that we talked about back in, I believe it was February or late January when I drove the car. Right. So I'm not going to rehash most of that stuff. The basics, if you want to get in on the ground floor with this car, 4.4 liter twin turbo V8, 577 horsepower from that, and then 553 pound-feet of torque. But when you throw in the single electric motor, it jumps to 717 horsepower, 738 pound-feet of torque. Wow. You can drive about 35 miles on that battery charge, or 50 kilometers. BMW is very, very aggressive with its regeneration. So you can actually go a little bit further than that, as I discovered. And the car weighs, I think it's within 150 pounds of the sedan. So you're looking at like 5,600 pounds or something in that. 5,465 pounds. So those are the basics of the car. It's extremely fast. It does 60 in 3.2 seconds. Does it matter that that's not as fast as it used to be? I don't know. I don't know who that matters to. The weight probably matters more if you were someone who took this car on the track. Almost no one takes these cars on the track. So again, not sure who that matters to. What I want to talk about is the fact that BMW's Wagon is coming out into a world where everyone drives SUVs now. So wagons are exotic, wagons are unusual, but this wagon did not feel all of that exotic because it's so big. It is such a big boned, heavy vehicle that in a lot of ways it comes across as an SUV. And that was unexpected to me. Just kind of the vibe while you're behind the wheel is that this is an enormous car. And it's not objectively huge. It is chunky, it is big, it is wide. And the fact that you have the longer roof really accentuates that aspect of the new 5 Series design. It does feel extremely heavy in the sense that, you know, it's holding the road, as people used to say. Maybe people used to say that, like, if they had those big cars from the 70s, like big heavyweight sedans, it holds the road real well. Well, modern PHEVs are like another level of weight on top of that, like F-150 levels of weight. And so that has a deadening effect on what's going on inside the car. So that my impression of the vehicle was largely along those lines. But then when you're outside of it, from like a profile angle, it's really an attractive vehicle. Mine was finished in this like dark green, which was super eye-catching. I had anyone who knows what this car is was unable to not interact with me while I was out on the road. People would drive up, give me the thumbs up, or want to talk about the car, or like be excited. People were zooming up beside me to take videos just because of how rare this car is. And if you're an enthusiast, you know that it's seeing one of these is going to be, it's a unicorn, you know, like this, there's not very many on my street. My neighbor has an RS6 and I met him driving down the road. And I want to think that I blew his mind to have this meeting of these two like super rare wagons just passing each other. That was a fun moment. In any case, I liked the car. The cargo space is useful, but you're going to want to be careful about what you put back there because so much of the space there's a lot of trim back there, which means that you want to make sure you're not getting stuff dirty, especially when you're folding down the seats and pushing things. Like I had some tires I needed to haul, and Sammy, I did not haul them. They were just too filthy, and I was not going to put them in the back of this carpeted cargo area. You also, I think the roof line is a little bit lower than what you would have in like an X5 or something. So that's going to impact cargo comparability to an SUV, a similarly priced SUV. But other than that, I think it's a useful vehicle. I think it's a comfortable vehicle. It is extremely ridiculously fast when you want it to be. You can also spend a lot of time just driving around on the battery. I got 26 miles per gallon in this thing.
Yeah, not bad.
That is wild for a 717 horsepower car. I checked back to see what I got with the sedan in the winter when it was very cold. I got 21 miles. So it is clearly very efficient if you're able to maximize the amount of time you spend plugged in, which I can do because I have a level 2 charger at home. Would I recommend this car? It's 120. It's 120 grand in the US. In Canada, let me double check the pricing. I have it here. It starts at 138. My model had the M carbon ceramic brakes, which were a $10,000 option.
Wow.
And total was 157,000. The color, which was called Angle C Green Metallic, was another $5,000. And I had the advanced driver package, which gave me adaptive cruise control and all that good stuff. Although
I can't believe that stuff is not standard.
Well, I think that some of it is, but if you want to like get the traffic jam assistant, which is some type of, I believe it's like a follow along version of the adaptive cruise control. You have to order it in the package. Like, I don't think it's an a la carte option. I think you do get adaptive cruise in the base model. Anyway, neither here nor there. No one's buying a base model M5. If you want to be different, then yes, get this car. But that's true of the M5 sedan too, I think. So.
Right.
Like the fact that it's a PHEV now, like this is a one of one. There's nothing else like this on the market.
I'm all kinds of like weirded out by the enthusiasm on the wagon, because as you mentioned, we've had the RS6 in Canada. We've had the E63 wagon, as well as I think even a C63 or a C43. I'm not sure.
C43, but that's like a fake AMG. That's like a,
Okay,
that's like,
just didn't have the hand built motor or whatever.
That's the M340i of AMG wagons.
Yeah, but only the people who really wanted them got them. They weren't like super high sellers, I think is the thing I'm going for.
Yeah, and they'll continue to be like that.
What was the, why now did BMW decide that the M5 deserves the wagon in our market? Why not, the previous generation, the non-PHEV model, the, any other version of this vehicle? And I also I think it's really funny because for years we've been saying the M5 is really good because it can serve as, a family-friendly vehicle. It can serve as a highway hauler. It could serve as a track car if you really want to melt some tires and brakes. Or it can just be a normal, anonymous kind of vehicle. But the moment I think you put it in that wagon form factor, it's a different visage. It just gives a totally different appeal and allure that I think maybe negates the original, sort of intention that all of the media had taken with the M5. Is that fair to say?
I don't understand how the wagon negates the M5
because
sedan.
When you see, there are no other wagons, right? There are no other BMW wagons, and
in North America right now,
North America, yes. So now that's different. That like that's again totally like special and different and like is quirky, I guess, in a way. And I don't know, there's something about it that makes me think like I'm over it. I don't know what happened to the I don't know what it is. I really don't know what it is.
I don't know what it is for you either. I'm not following your.
It's super strange. I thought I would really like dig it. I like the idea of a plug-in hybrid performance car. But that already happened, and now we're just like iterating on it with this body style. And
so the fact that the car is more useful and objectively looks better is a problem for you.
No, I don't.
You liked it when it was a sedan, but now that it's more
no,
practical,
maybe I would have wanted the sedan first. I mean, I would have wanted the wagon first. Hit me with the special stuff.
This is really weird.
Get me on the hype train immediately. Don't do it to me.
This is strange. This is I can't go down this road with you.
Okay, that's fine. I understand.
I'm having trouble keeping up with this.
I don't know what it is. I agree with you. I'm sorry. I just don't know what it is.
You don't have to apologize for having an unusual opinion.
And I don't know what that opinion is grounded in. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't know what is making me feel not uncomfortable, just not like just uninterested in
Show
the
us
M5
on the doll
wagon.
where the M5 Touring touched you. It's like how it feels. Like it's like this car did something horrible to you, and you can't tell me because you're under an NDA.
yeah, that's it.
Okay, let me ask you this.
Yeah, tell me.
It's $120,000.
Yeah,
you need something practical. What are you buying instead?
But we know this. We know this is a fact that anybody who buys one of these high-performance wagons, it is not their only vehicle. It is just so funny to me.
My RS6 neighbor, you know what their other vehicle is?
It's an F-150.
No, it is a late 90s Mazda B3000 pickup.
Okay, so
with a box that's a different color than the front fenders.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see where a performance sedan fills in the gaps in that garage.
Wagon.
I mean, a performance wagon fills in the gaps in that household. Yeah, I mean, if that is your one vehicle does it all, yeah, it makes a ton of sense.
No, but you haven't answered my question. I'm asking you what you would buy for $120,000 if you needed a practical vehicle. What would you buy? You, Sami.
I needed one? That's the question.
I'm saying you need a practical vehicle. It can be whatever context you want. What are you buying? A Cayenne? What are you buying?
I don't know. Yeah, I guess I would get an M. I guess if... I don't know. I don't really know the market that much at $120,000 now. I'm off.
You just drove a $90,000 EX.
Yeah,
you said
I'm not
no
buying
one should buy.
Yeah, so we know that one's off the table, Ben. And the AMGs are all in a similar situation. I think RS6 is really cool, but I think I'm leaning towards like these EVs. But when like a Taycan or an e-tron GT.
No.
Then,
These are you're missing the point here. I think a Taycan or an e-tron, like you're saying, like these are wagons, are they?
I guess you can get a Taycan wagon.
Can you?
Yeah.
Is it the same size as the BMW?
No, I think it's smaller.
There's no way it's $120,000.
No, it's probably $200,000.
Okay, so again, like, are you buying an X7? Are you buying an Audi SUV? Are you buying an Escalade? Like,
no, I'm not getting any of those things. So like, I guess I am getting a BMW. Now you've sold me. I guess
no, I'm not saying
I'm going to the dealership right now, and I have to put some money down.
I think it's far too heavy for me to personally own as a performance car. I think it's interesting as I think maybe if you had this plug-in hybrid drivetrain, and it doesn't even have to have this kind of horsepower, but it was like a lot cheaper, I think that would be interesting. Here I go again. But what I mean is, like, if it was a non-M plug-in hybrid wagon, I think that's also interesting and maybe more compelling, because
maybe that's what I'm trying to say is
because I would like to be able to drive around on battery power, and I would like to not be able to do that. And I don't.
What about an i5 wagon?
Yeah, that would be cool, but that's, I think, something completely different.
That'd be cool. See,
what about an iX, I guess? Would you take an iX over an M5 wagon?
No, I mean, the iX is very good, but it's just not an M5, you know? Even I drove the M version of the iX, which is, I think, the M60.
Yeah, they're similar
really
weights,
wild,
too, I think.
But it's not an M5. Like, it just isn't. It isn't as special. It doesn't have character the way the M5 does.
Okay, well, wrapping up on the M5 Touring, again, I'm glad this car exists, just because I would maybe want one that's not as potent. I like the form factor. I would like it to be less crazy priced. I would like it to be a little lighter. I would like it to be a non-M car. But that doesn't take anything away from this vehicle. I'm glad it exists. I'm glad it's unique. I'm glad someone's building unusual cars. The RS6 was also unusual when it came out. You know, these are definite choices that are being made, as Sami pointed out, not with the idea that they're going to sell a lot of them, just with the idea that they want to have this in the showroom.
Right.
I want to, we had a couple listeners write in with some questions or more comments. I want to start with one of the comments, and that was from someone whom we're not going to name because of their association with Hyundai, and I don't want to dox them, but they wrote in to correct me, because I always call, a couple of weeks ago we talked about, or maybe it was last week, the Santa Cruz, the Hyundai Santa Cruz, and how I always end up saying it's based on the Santa Fe platform. It is not. It is based on the Tucson platform. Sami corrected me in the show. I've talked about it on other shows, and I made the same mistake. So listener wrote to me saying, no, you know what? It's the Tucson, and they're right. And I need to figure out why I keep doing that. In any case, they had an interesting insight on the Santa Cruz that I have not previously considered. And that is that instead of saying that the competitor to the Santa Cruz is a Maverick or it's an SUV, the actual competitor to these small pickups is like a mid-size or large sedan that has a cargo receiver, a cargo attachment on the hitch.
Either on the hitch or on the, I guess, on the hitch or the roof, even for more cargo.
Basically, something where you can carry extra gear. And their argument is, you know, Santa Cruz is a vehicle which is, you like the Tucson as an SUV, but you want your stuff to get wet when it rains.
Yeah.
or you want people to more easily steal it without having to break glass in your vehicle. And these are good points that I never thought of. Like, you're giving up something, aka covered protected storage, for the idea that you're going to use unprotected storage, even though unprotected storage carries a number of drawbacks. And the best of both worlds option is a cargo carrier that's mounted on your hitch. Sami, do you agree with this?
Yeah, totally. I think that's very true. I think one of the funniest things we keep saying that these compact trucks are like competitors to real trucks, but in reality, the modern SUV, compact or mid-range SUV, is just so capable in terms of towing and hauling that all it takes is a cargo, you know, a trailer or a mounted,
not even a trailer. Like, this is far simpler than a trailer. It's just like a bike rack, basically.
Or a rack of some
that you have like a Thule carrier on or something like that.
Yeah.
So Thank you for that insight. I appreciate it. And now I think about these vehicles differently, and that is a good thing.
Well, I think, do you have cargo carriers for any of your, or have you had cargo carriers for any of
No,
your cars?
I don't.
Yeah, I wonder what life will be like when that is a regular fixture in a regular accessory for one of our vehicles.
Well, I mean, I can tell you that my neighbor, when I lived in Montreal, had one that they never took off. They had a Kia Rondo, and it was always on the top. It kills your fuel mileage.
It kills fuel mileage. It kills NVH in terms of like wind noise as well.
So you need, these are things you need to use when you're using them, and then take them off when you're not. That's the whole idea. Is it's removable storage. But people, you get used to it. It's there. It's heavy. You don't want to take it off. Blah blah blah.
We have another listener from Australia. Their name is Justin. They are asking us about whether or not we would consider buying a vehicle, a 2025 model year vehicle in about 15 years, knowing that there's a chance of a software issue, and whether or not that would be a big risk, and whether or not like we felt comfortable with either the in-car software, the safety systems that are prevalent in modern vehicles, and whether those features would stay reliable and safe after 15 years.
Now, they used an example where they had a problem with their Forester, where the eyesight system was locking up at highway speeds.
Yeah. And
they ended up going back to it's a newish Forester too, like a 2023.
Yeah.
And they end up going to the dealership and having the system reset, which is, freaking them out. I would be freaked out too. I would
turn it on and turn it off and turn it back on.
So 15 years from now, here's the thing. There are some complex cars from the past that I do not recommend anyone buy. Like any complex luxury car from 15 years ago, there's a reason it's depreciated so much, and that is because a $100,000 car 20 years later still has $100,000 car maintenance to do.
Yeah.
And that can be very expensive. Now, Sami, do you think that software will follow the same kind of path?
I think so. I think we may have... Look, you have a smartphone, right? Like how old is your oldest smartphone, and could you use it again today? Like I have some older phones that are maybe let's say not 10 years old, but less than 10 years old. They work-ish. They're not useless, but like so the standard that we have set in terms of performance, in terms of reliability of them, has changed, right?
I think that's maybe not the best example, and I'll tell you why. I think it's because smartphones are designed to interact with the world around them, and the world around them is constantly changing its own software. And so if an older phone is like
incompatibilities,
or not just incompatibilities, but I guess it's part of it, but it's just not intended to keep pace with what's happening. Okay. But I think in a car, if it's doing car things, then theoretically you have less of an incompatibility issue. I think about stuff like communication standards have changed, like when we lose different Bluetooth versions, for example. But even more than that, when 3G was sunsetted, when 2G was sunsetted, a lot of older vehicles lost their features. I think that is definitely a problem for every car that's out there right now. Whenever 4G or whatever we're calling 4G ends up no longer being supported by communications towers, then you're going to lose a ton of features as a result of that. I think that is a problem 15 years from now.
Yeah, these changing and these standards, I think, are dropping off at a quicker rate than they used to, right? Like 3G lasted a fairly long time.
The other thing, too, is like, if we're talking about, there's a lot of talk about software defined vehicles. And if your
EX90 is 100% a talk of that, right?
So if it's entirely...
What happens when Google decides Android Automotive OS is no longer a priority of theirs, which they've done with so many other features in their like products in their stack, right? Like how many Google products have just disappeared off the face of the earth? For sure,
but theoretically that the vehicle can still doing its vehicle things. You're going to lose tertiary stuff like communications systems that maybe you didn't need, or the ability to shop from your car. But I think the systems in the vehicle, I think the software that runs the vehicle is probably a safe bet, especially if we start looking at electric cars where everything is so much simpler. And in fact, Justin, I know that you're in the industry, in the communications industry. And I think that what we might see, not so much for gas powered vehicles, because I think it's much more complicated, but just in terms of the different tasks that are going on in in a gas powered car or a diesel powered car, and the amount of knowledge that's required to make sure all of that runs properly. But in an electric car, it would not surprise me if people develop their own firmware and we're able to
We're
able to jailbreak older cars.
This
when
is
that
the
becomes a
Fisker
problem.
Ocean owners group is their dream, but
this is what
they
I
have
think,
not been able to do that yet.
But 15 years from now, if we're talking about existing
they're
auto
going to
systems
root or
today,
jailbreak their car. They're going to make some sort of open source software.
if you have like a Chevy Bolt,
that would be so cool.
I think that because we've opened up the ECUs of so many gas vehicles and we can tune those. Why can't we do so with electric cars?
I thought there's DRM stopping the and signatures that are like making these things really difficult to.
A lot of that stuff can be gone around.
That's true.
It just depends, and given enough time and enough hardware and enough, enthusiasts on a forum, maybe you can make it happen. Anyway, that's my thought. I don't know.
That's a great point. I think with the software-defined vehicle, the idea of jailbreaking a car is a definite possibility. That's a really good point. But what will happen when it is... I mean, do they have... Look, there's this thing that happened in the video game world where Nintendo changed their end-user license agreement that if they find out that you've modified it in any way or form, they can just brick your device then and there.
Yeah, I mean, theoretically...
Could Volvo do that to you if you decided, I don't want LiDAR to be on?
What if you've jailbroken your vehicle and you're no longer connected to the Volvo mothership? Like, maybe that's why you're doing it.
But you need to get service at some point, and you're just going to take it to,
I don't go to the dealership for service.
Yeah, maybe.
The other thing, too, to think about is insurance companies and safety equipment.
Oh, yeah.
And, like... Are you going to want to jailbreak your LiDAR, and are you going to want to jailbreak your airbag activators? Like, what are you really going to do? I think
for better performance, all the juice that goes into those.
No, but who's liable if you're in an accident and that doesn't go off? At that
exactly.
point, that's when things start to get really complicated. So, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen.
I don't know.
I'm not super worried about the software that makes the vehicle run. I am concerned about all the other extraneous software that I don't think will age well.
I think 15 years is a long gap in the automotive industry. I know that most people are actually switching out of cars and around the 15-year mark, and which means that when they get into a new car, it's like time traveling. Like, it's crazy, right?
Yeah. Going
back in time to a 15-year-older car, I think does the same thing. I think
I don't know.
Progressive vehicles can be quite.
I regularly drive.
I just sunset actually my 2010, right?
I mean, I still regularly drive a 2004 and a 1987 vehicle.
But those weren't soft. Those weren't like heavily soft. They had no safety features. I'm thinking about my 2010.
My 04 has a screen and drive modes and stuff like that. Like, it's in there and it all works. The only thing that doesn't work anymore is the 2G connection to OnStar.
Yeah.
But that doesn't affect any of the functionality of the vehicle.
That's true. I guess
that's what I meant by like tertiary systems. Like, I think you're going to lose the ability to, use your phone to unlock your car maybe, or call for roadside assistance with a button. That kind of stuff, I don't think we can count on lasting.
One more thing actually before we end this, because I think we mistake, we think that when cars become computers as they've done, that's the way it is. But I think that there are more, or at least my understanding is that there are really stringent automotive grade standards that vehicles have to work in certain temperatures, low temperatures, high temperatures, and they have to endure some pretty serious like torture tests that I think me and you have both seen. I think I've seen the Chevy one. I think you've seen maybe a Korean one.
I don't, as we've established, I don't necessarily remember everything I've seen.
And that these cars can go through some pretty hefty, pretty serious torture. And again, to witness a infotainment system turning on and working at minus 30 or minus 40 degrees Celsius, that's actually nuts. If
it's not that nuts. I'm out there working.
Put your phone on your doorstep in the winter and then see if it'll turn on the next day.
Yeah, but my phone did not cost $90,000.
I know. But
if it did, if it did, I would expect it to turn on at the center of the sun. You know what I mean?
Okay, fine, whatever. I'm making my point. I think automotive grade standards are a little bit tougher than we think and might make it past the 15-year mark for sure.
All right. Well, Sammy, if people have, if other listeners have questions they would like to ask us or insight into vehicles that we discussed, how would they get in touch with us?
They just head on over to our website, unnamedautomotivepodcast.com. There's a contact form there. You fill it out. It lands in our inbox. Me and Ben talk about it the next day and bring it up on the next available podcast. We love talking about what you guys send us. Do not hesitate. Send us your thoughts, your feedback, your questions, whatever's going on in your brain. If you want someone to talk to, me and Ben are here for you. You can also reach out to us on social media. You can find both Ben and myself on Instagram. I'm at Sammy_ha, like you're laughing. Ben is at Hunting Benjamin. He's also on Blue Sky at Hunting Benjamin, and I'm at Sammy-ha, like you're laughing.
Sammy, what are we going to be talking about next week? Next week is the last podcast before you go on vacation.
That's right. I do have one quick follow-up to give you on a BMW X3 that I've retested lately for one of my publications. And I'm going to tell you what it's like to revisit a car that I had feelings about before, I guess.
I'm also sort of revisiting a car. It's the 2025 Ford Mustang GT convertible. Last year, I drove a GT coupe in the summer and a EcoBoost convertible in the fall, but now I'm combining and flipping those things around. So I'll have some thoughts.
So more fun stuff to talk about next week. I can't wait. I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Bye, everybody.